All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Ben. Yesterday's video was a big success for code weavers because what it really did was it proved that code weavers and crossover do a really great job of converting Vulkan and DirectX 12 to Metal, and that's really why there wasn't a performance difference between native and crossover running Cyberpunk 2077 on the Mac. But a lot of you pointed out that if you use an FSR, you can get some really good performance. And I didn't actually catch this at the time. Apparently, without FSR, it was actually a little bit slower without ray tracing. So what we're going to do today is we're going to run the game on high instead of ultra. We're going to do it at 1440p, but we're also going to add upscaling. We're going to look at FSR in crossover, FSR on the Mac, and then MetalFX upscaling on the Mac, and see how it performs. You'll be able to see how it looks in this video. And then one other thing that I'll get to at the end about the platform wars, which is, in my opinion, childish. All right, so anyway, we're going to fire up Cyberpunk. And before we do that, I'm going to make sure that in my sound settings, we are outputting over HDMI. That's great. All right, so we're going to fire up Cyberpunk, and we're going to just set up the benchmark. All right, so now let's take a look at how the game runs in crossover. So when we go to settings, we go to video, we're at 1440p at full screen. VSync is off, no maximum FPS. We go to graphics, we're on the high preset. Let me turn this down. I don't need to hear that. A high preset, FSR set to quality. And so this should actually improve performance considerably. Compared to Ultra 1440p with no upscaling. This might actually be probably for most people is going to be a more enjoyable way to play the game. All right out of the gate, we can see here the frame rate is up over 60. We're not doing any frame generation. I'm going to save that because I'm not a fan of it. If you love it, turn it on, play it. Honestly, guys, it's a game. Enjoy your game the way you want to play it. Anyway, FSR looks pretty good here at 1440p. The frame rate is obviously much higher than it was, and it still looks fantastic with high settings and FSR enabled. All right, the benchmark's finishing up. We were up over 80 a big chunk of the time, definitely over 60 always. An average of 75 FPS, and that's pretty good. I would call that extremely playable and very smooth. Go back to settings one more time, and we'll do ray tracing medium again, but we're also going to do quality. With ray tracing, we'll do balanced FSR, and we'll see how that runs as well. So this is 1440p still. Medium ray tracing with FSR set to balanced. It should be much faster than it was in yesterday's video. All right, so yesterday in the bar here, this was running at about 30 FPS. Now it is, and that was at 1080p with no upscaling. Higher resolution, but with balanced upscaling. The render resolution is lower, but in the end, looks better because we're upscaling. We're adding some detail back, and the frame rate is quite a bit higher than it was when we ran this test without any upscaling at 1080p yesterday. And honestly, you'll need to play with settings for yourself and see what mix of upscaling and what frame rate is acceptable and what resolution is acceptable. That's why you're playing on a computer and not a PlayStation, because a PlayStation makes those choices for you. All right, and so now instead of, what was it, like it was in the low 30s, mid 30s, now we're up over 40, uh, but at a higher resolution with upscaling. So anyway, this probably puts the GPU back as a uh, bottleneck, but we're using some upscaling to make it look nicer and run a little smoother. All right, so let's get out of crossover. All right, so we're gonna drop this down to 1440, still no VSync, no maximum FPS. Go to graphics, we're gonna set it to high, which actually turns on MetalFX scaling, but we're gonna change this to FSR quality first. Now the frame rate is astronomical. This concerns me that I've got frame generation turned on and I didn't notice. Because 100 and some odd FPS is nuts. Did not expect this at all. Oh yeah, frame generation was on. Dang it, I just wasn't paying attention. All right, we're gonna set this back to high, turn off frame generation. I didn't catch that that got turned on here where it didn't get turned. I don't think it got turned. Shit. All right, without frame gen, it is still like 30% faster. This is the difference between having a GPU bottleneck and a CPU bottleneck. This is the difference between running crossover and emulating an Intel CPU or an AMD, whatever, emulating an x86 64-bit processor and running native ARM64 code in macOS Sequoia. So the frame rate is much higher with quality upscaling, high settings at 1440p. This looks still pretty fantastic, and I bet we could turn off upscaling and have just as good an experience as we saw in Windows or in the Windows app. All right. So overall, we got a performance that is almost 92 FPS versus 75 running over crossover. That is 17 frames per second, so just over a 20% difference by running the native game. And also our memory usage, as was pointed out by a commenter, is much lower. We're only using 9.25 gig versus I think it was around 12 when we were doing this with crossover. That makes a lot of sense because we're not loading a bunch of Windows libraries that we don't need. That was with MetalFX scaling. Let's do FSR also at quality. But the performance is, at least to start with, about the same. We were in the low 80s in this scene, and it was once we got out the door that it went way up. I will say I think that MetalFX does a better job of hiding some of those jaggies. You know, we'll have to go back and look at the video and just see what the difference is. And of course, this is without any frame gen. So I think the alternative is you could run this at around 60 FPS with no upscaling and then turn on FSR3 frame generation and get just as smooth or maybe a slightly smoother experience. Frame generation is controversial, and at low native frame rates, I don't like it because it feels laggy. But once you hit 60 frames per second, it's not so bad. All right, so we finished out. We're 92 frames per second, almost 93. A negligible difference in performance between FSR quality and MetalFX quality. All right, so now we're gonna go around to ray tracing medium. We'll leave it at MetalFX, but we're going to do balanced. We're going to leave frame generation off, texture quality high, all that good stuff. All right, let's run it. All right, so out of the gate, this is higher than what we saw from this, from 1080p native, which I guess is true of when we did that on the, did that without ray tracing too. So watch these bar lights go by, and then we're going to take a look at that again when we run with FSR, and we're going to see what the quality difference is. You know, it's obvious, there's obvious aliasing regardless, because it's trying to put back detail that just was never rendered in the first place. Okay, so 51 FPS versus 47 that we got on the Windows version. It's again close to 10% faster, but the GPU is obviously the bottleneck. That's what's going to happen. All right, so let's do FSR. Oh, we could do both. 2.1 is the default, so we'll do 2.1 is what we tested with before. It was the default on Windows, so we're going to leave it there. No frame gen, texture quality high. All right, and now we're back in the bar. And so here we come up on that bar again. Those lights as we come around this hallway and back around. To me, the crawling is definitely more. There's a higher degree of that crawling here. Frame rates are about the same though, I think. We'll run it with FSR 3 and do an image quality difference on Mac OS, because I think this is the first game that implements both FSR 2 and FSR 3. All right, so 51 FPS, that's about the same. And then we'll bump it up to FSR 3 and balanced. All right, so here we go. With FSR 3. The fun thing's going to be when Tahoe is finally released. Oh, you know what? That might actually be the best those lights at the bar have looked at different angles. That's nice. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when Tahoe is available and you can run games in crossover with DLSS enabled. You know, that has been added to the Game Porting Toolkit version 3, a way to convert DLSS to MetalFX upscaling. I'd be really interested to see how the NPU accelerated anti-aliasing runs and looks once that final version is out. But boy, FSR 3 looked a lot better than either MetalFX upscaling or FSR 2. So that was nice. All right, one final test I want to look at on the Mac is running at high, just straight across the board, the regular high preset. But we're going to go over to video here and run it up to 4K. I have a 4K monitor. I'm only capturing at 1080p, but I like gaming in 4K. I like high frame rates. So we're going to take a look at just the high preset at 4K. See if we can at least hit close to 60 FPS. No. Okay, so we're going to get about 45 FPS with quality upscaling. It looks really sharp because we're at 4K now. All right, so 48 frames per second. That is obviously not good enough. Now, there's several of you who pointed out, you know, this runs better on a PC. It runs better on a PC. Well, that's true. So let me press a button on my KVM. Actually, before I do that, I just want to point out I'm a professional software developer. I am not a professional YouTuber. And part of my professional software development job requires building for iOS. And the Mac is a hardware dongle that blocks iOS development. I've been a Mac user for 30 years, since the 90s. I like the integration. It's fine. You know, the point of these videos is, can you play on a Mac? And the answer is yes. But if we're going to do some serious gaming, let me just press this button on my KVM. Hello, computer, wake up, please. Don't freak out. There we go. All right, so there's Steam on my PC. It's not like I'm not aware of this stuff. Here is my Ryzen 7 9800X3D on an ASRock Radeon RX 9070 XT. Hang on. Let's go for a ride. I want to show you. Yes, I do have the Mac Studio, but I also have this enormous RGB beast. You know, whatever. Put that back. And that doesn't look... Okay, that looks like I got it about centered. All right, so just for fun, let's run Cyberpunk on Windows. Or, yeah, on Windows. Yes, I'm aware we can play anyway. So I just updated to 2.3 on my Windows machine as well. And we're going to make the Mac Studio look silly because it's a 70 watt gaming, a 70 watt Mac and not a 400 watt gaming PC. So of course it's going to be faster. It needs to be for the amount of extra electricity it consumes, the extra space it takes up, and all those pretty RGB lights it puts out. RGBs make it go fast. Everybody knows that. So we're going to put this thing, 2160. We're going to put this thing at regular ultra, regular high. Apples to apples comparison. But no VSync. Yes, okay. So this should be kind of ridiculous. As opposed to 48 FPS on the Mac, we're going to see something a lot more here. And yes, Karen, I know I have FSR 4 available on this card. FSR 4 is in Cyberpunk. Again, I feel like if that's what you're going to put in the comments, you're kind of missing the point. It's not about platform wars. I love all platforms. I got a PS5 in the living room. I've got, you know, this PC here, and I've got the Mac that I do my day job on. So it's not about what platform is better. It just isn't. It's about what can you do with the hardware. That's what's fun. I've got see, down here is my Quicksilver 2002 Power Mac G4. I've got a Sawtooth. I've got like 30 years of computers here to play with. It's fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. All right, so yeah, the RX 9070 XT is 2.5 times ish faster. That is 100% what I expected, but again, not the point. Anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to my rant, and thanks for watching. I really appreciate feedback. So let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, deuces.